For my project, I wanted it to be more of a book that I was reading to you. I did my project on medieval clothing. Chapter 1: Why I chose medieval clothing and its connection to literature. I chose medieval clothing for my presentation because clothing is the same self-expression that can be used in literature. In many books or poems, novels to stories, there's complete self-expression from the author in those works of literature. The author uses their likes and their dislikes, their personality and character in their literary works just the same as an individual dressing themselves would, as they would use the same aspects. In the time of the 15th century, from what I've learned and read, is that self-expression can be portrayed by numerous mediums. The medium that I have chose that shows great self-expression of the time is their clothing. Though this can be subjective because not every individual at the time could afford proper clothing, and not everyone dressing themselves is expressing themselves. They are just simply wearing clothes to get their day done. But other than that, there are individuals of the time that take great pride in self-expression in the medium of clothing. Even I use self-expression in the clothing that I wear. It's a great way to non-verbally say who you are, and that is why I'm interested in this topic. It can mean so many things. It doesn't just have to mean fabric on skin, and that is that. It can be a portrayal of self. I'm very interested in clothing from the 1800s. I own countless pieces from the time that have a few books on Victorian clothing that were written in the 1800s and explain in great detail about clothing with depictions and accordion pages to show great detailed pictures. For a 150-year-old book, it is rather amazing to see. If only I had a book on medieval clothing that was like this. Chapter 2: What medieval clothing entailed. Medieval clothing of the 1400s, partly the 1480s and upwards, consisted of lighter, sleeker, and more, I want to say, modest clothing. Nothing too flashy, yet simple, elegant, and beautiful, compared to previous years where the clothing is very statement-worthy, colorful, and really showed your status during the time. That is also the last of the angular silhouettes in clothing that we see women wear previous to the 1480s, where a new form emerges, where it's slender and streamlined for men and molded for women. Molded being the fact that this was the time where corsetry was being utilized in the medieval fashion. Amy Blackwell from the book about medieval clothing states that during the 14th and 15th century, tailors became more skillful and clothing began to fit better than previous centuries. Men's tunics went from long shirts to just above the hips in length, and stockings evolved into tights. Also stated by Amy Blackwell, she states that a man would tie his stockings to a short sleeveless tunic and cover that with a long sleeve jacket called a jupon or pourpoint. The coat hardie still existed, but only nobles wore it in this period. Women wore a chemise made of fine linen or silk cloth. Over that, a woman would wear a dress called a corset, with a bodice laced up the front, long tight sleeves, and a full skirt. Over that, she would wear a surcoat with a low neckline and large armholes, through which the corset and chemise could be seen. During this period, both sexes began wearing a gown called a houppelande. The garment and its sleeves both fell to the floor. The hems of the sleeves were cut in elaborate patterns and ornately embroidered. The houppelande was usually worn with a high collar. Both men and women continued to wear shoes made of leather or cloth. Men wore fitted leather boots when they were outside or rode horses. For inside wear, some men wore shoes with long pointed toes, occasionally stiffened into curls with whalebone or wire. When they went outside, both sexes tied wooden platforms called pattens to their shoes, which kept the shoes and hems of their garments off the mud and dust. And this picture over here is in detail the shoes of the Adoration of the Magi Sandro Botticelli in 1475, tempera on wood. Chapter 3: The Undergarments. In the time, women wore their basic undergarments, but these aren't the undergarments that we're used to. They used a chemise that was made with linen, for noblewomen's silks, and for the poorer individuals, their chemise was made with hemp cloth. Many of these undergarments that we have seen in manuscripts are either white or off-white to a more sheer, with the use of a more transparent material. The chemise is long to the feet like a dress, either short or long-sleeved, and served the purpose of protecting the overclothes from sweat, as well as skin protection from rougher material clothing like wool. This is a painting by Sandro Botticelli, which is a detailed oiled painting from 1485 of Venus and Mars, where you can see Venus wearing a chemise, a light undergarment that can be used as a fashion statement that captured the beauty of the female form. While men's undergarments are closely related to today's clothes of an undershirt and boxers, men of the 1400s would wear braies and undertunics, braies being the underwear. These were made with cotton and polyester and are stretchy to conform to the body so they are not visible underneath the clothes. Historians found that there are more depictions of men's underwear than that of women's, because possible idea being that an unclothed man would be humorous as opposed to lewd during the time. This would concern the lower half of the body. We know of the chemise for women, just nothing credible on what they wore as underwear, though they most likely could have worn underwear and probably did. But for men, the braise, which is the underwear, would then be tied to a long fitted sock that would resemble pants or tights. The braise came in two types: short, resembling boxer briefs, or long and hanging loosely above the knee with billowing mounds of fabric. This is a depiction of three men that can be seen wearing these undertunics and braise in a courtyard from the Maciejewski Bible. Where on the left, the man is wearing the undertunic, short braise, and long fitted socks. On the right, the man is wearing only long, billowy braise. Chapter 3, the overclothes. The women of the period wore their chemises, but over them they could wear an assortment of clothing. In this period, the designs are starting to enter a newer look, more form-fitting look. And by that, there are portraits of women wearing tight-fitted clothing. There was a famous painting by Botticelli that portrays a young woman in a dress called a gamma. This dress is intentionally made to show more of the under chemise. It has a low front cut exposing the chemise as well as a tight-fitting shoulder cut. The waistline is higher in the front and lower in the back. This dress was most likely worn by a high-class individual, where this would be worn at home as an everyday kind of leisure dress. This is a depiction of a woman wearing a gamma from 1485 by Sandro Botticelli. There are many of other dresses which consisted of many styles, colors, and patterns. Another dress that is fitting for this was worn over the gamma, as women of the time had many layers to their clothing. This dress was called a chopa, which is a beautiful outer garment that was worn in winter. Another famous painting by Domenico depicts a few ladies wearing this chopa. This dress has a rounded neckline filled with linen gorget, and a lace train on the back that is supported by the belt at a high waistline. The flowing curtains of fabric for the skirt, as well as gamma showing at the sleeves. This chopa can be seen as the blue dress in the painting. Another dress in the painting, which can be seen as the red dress, is called a joria, which both ladies have a similar colored gamma showing at the sleeves. This dress is a sideless cape that is open at the front, showing the gamma's lace. The sleeves are made with the same red materials as the gamma. There is a loop train in the back, and the material is of a beautiful designed velvet. In this painting, two sisters are in the dresses I mentioned, the blue chopa being Salvagia Sassetti and Elisabetta Sassetti in the red Gorgia. On the men's attire, they wore their usual undergarments, their braise, and their undertunics, but over them they can be seen wearing more robe-like clothing, similar to a women's dress, but with a more slim look, with lower belt lines to portray a more masculine physique. In a painting by an unknown artist in the 1400s, a man can be seen wearing what is called a doublet with a narrow standing collar and is tied down with gold tip laces. Over it, he was wearing a black overgarment that is woven piled wool, the white fabrics being silk. Another painting by Domenico can show men wearing long chopas, mantellos, and narrow open coats of silks and linens. Another painting by Sandro Botticelli portrays a young man in a brown wool doublet with fine white fringe at the neck and down the front. The sleeves are made of the same materials and are only attached under the arm and in the back, showing the undertunic through the slits. Chapter 4, the sources. Finding the sources for this project was really fun. I couldn't find many appropriate sources that I could use on this topic in a timely manner. I would have loved to make this project longer and have it go on for a half hour or an hour so I conclude every aspect of their clothing, why they wore these particular clothes, who inspired the design, some famous tailors of the time, and so on. But I was only able to speak on a few aspects that gave the general idea of medieval clothing. More of a narrowed focus. The book on clothing and footwear in medieval history by Amy Blackwell gave me very credible information about the clothing of this period. It was very easy to read and very descriptive on the topic. I used a website that is a fashion history timeline made in New York City. This was an EDU website and was very credible after I cross-checked some of the information. This website was full of clothing history of every year dating back to prehistoric times and every other year to today's time on changes on clothing through the years, which amazed me. I also use another website for the men's and women's chemises and undergarments. That website gave me more clear information on that topic. All the photos I had used in this presentation were used from the websites. Thank you. These are my sources.